In 2016, Christian Theological Seminary, with support from the Mike and Sue Smith Family Fund, created the Faith in Action Project to inspire collaboration among faith communities, nonprofits, and government agencies in order to help reduce poverty in Indianapolis.
And especially grateful to be included in this conversation about ending poverty. For a long time, criminal justice wasn't included in conversations about poverty. We, as a nation, had done it again, that we had created a new system of racial and social control in the United States, a new system of legal discrimination that was locking millions of people out of employment, housing, access to education, basic public benefits. But what I discovered in my work representing victims of profiling and police brutality and investigating patterns of drug law enforcement in poor communities of color and attempting to assist people who had been released from prison as they faced one legal barrier after another just to survival. I had a series of experiences that led to a real awakening that our criminal justice system now functions much more like a system of racial and social control than a system of crime prevention and control. And so I wanted to draw attention to the reality that a new system of racial and social control had been born again, and that through the war on drugs and the Get Tough movement, millions of people have been swept in prisons and jails, branded criminals and felons, and then stripped of the very rights supposedly won in the civil rights movement, like the right to vote, the right to serve on juries, and the right to be free of legal discrimination in employment, housing, access to education, and basic public benefits. The war on drugs and the Get Tough movement decimated poor communities of color in this country. And within a few short decades, our nation engaged in a race to incarcerate, a prison building boom unlike anything this world has ever seen. And it has become normalized now. If we fail to learn to care for one another across lines of race, class, gender, all forms of sexual orientation and difference, if we fail, whatever kind of political revolution we think we've won will wind up replicating the forms of exploitation and abuse of power that we've seen in this country over and over again. Color blindness is the problem because we cannot be blind to one another and learn to care for one another. Spiritual blindness and spiritual indifference is the greatest threat of all. That we want to think that it's the bigot, that it's the Nazi, that it's the open white supremacist, that poses the greatest threat. But it's actually the blindness, the unwillingness to see the suffering of the other. The indifference, that is the biggest danger.
It's the economic mobility study that you cited, and a lot of people in the audience tonight are familiar with the work of the economist Raj Chetty on economic mobility. And by the Raj Chetty study in Indianapolis, if you are born in the bottom 20% of income, your chances of getting to the top 20% of income are lower than 45 of the top 50 cities in the United States.
Whoever our society defines as the least, if you see in that person not only a child of God, but you looking in the eyes of Jesus himself, well, that turns the whole world upside down.
Yeah.
And so I think there's an enormous amount of power in all of our faith traditions.
It's been through the exposure to some of these individuals and these stories and the relationships that can't be discounted if we're going to figure out how to scale and grow some of these efforts that exist.
That I want for your kids what I want for my kids. I want education for their brains. I want my kids to be smarter than me. I want food for their stomachs. I want hope for their hearts. I want work for their hands, and I want health care for their bodies.
Our goal for this year was to try to re-engage 100 young people. We thought, let's use basketball as a hook. Let's open up a space 7 to 11 p.m. Let's feed them. Let's just try to build relationships. throughout the course of the summer, with no marketing, we had over 700 young people show up. They are hungry for this opportunity. They want to be able to come together, and we are required to create that space for them.
If we manage to downsize our prison system, but put entire communities under perpetual electronic surveillance and control, that is not a win. That's not progress. That's the birth of a new system of racial and social control.
There are real policy issues at play, and you need elected officials who have the backbone to be able to stand up and really fight the good fight. I would also say that the reality is concentrations of poverty in our city, and there are physical barriers for people being able to access jobs, transportation, childcare, food deserts. Recognize them, and if you are a business owner or if you have a capacity and a skill set, help those individuals. Create ride-sharing programs, open up a daycare, open up a co-op grocery store. And then finally, and really what the booth is out there, sign up to mentor, really. I mean, it can be an exhaustive process if you want it to be, if you want to spend 20 hours with a young person.
The hard truth, as Michele reveals, is African American males are no more likely to use or sell illegal drugs than white males. And yet, they are far more likely to serve time. And that time has consequences for the rest of their lives, for their families, for their loved ones. Frankly, it has consequences for all of us. We live as one city. We experience justice and prosperity as one city. And in that way, I do believe, deep in my heart, that we can be one city.